My name is Rick Miller. I am 38 years old and currently have a girlfriend, Tina. I have been in a relationship with her for about 3 years, and I love her. We have discussed the possibility of marriage many times and have mutually agreed that we would rather not get married. To be honest, I have been married before, but it ended miserably. I won't go into details now, but perhaps some of the circumstances will come to light later. Tina has been married before too, and that also ended miserably. I think we both feel we don't want to ruin a good relationship by getting married. I guess we're both a little afraid that if we get married, we'll repeat the bad events of the past. Anyway, we are not married and don't plan on changing that anytime soon. I had a date with Tina to take her to a fancy reception at the most beautiful hotel in town. She was going to receive an award from the KC Chamber of Commerce for aspiring business people. Tina is the owner of a jazz club in Kansas City called the Baca Club. It was at the Baca Club that I first met Tina. I was leaving Kansas City for a while, and when I came back, I wanted to play jazz. I had already been playing in New Orleans under the name Rick Thriller, and I really enjoyed playing with other jazz performers and enthusiasts. I went to a club called Jared's Jazz Club, where there were jams with other jazz musicians a couple of times a week. I played tenor saxophone, and I have to admit, I play pretty well. One night after a concert, a pretty girl from the audience came up to me. She said, "Hi, Thriller. I'm Christina Baca from the Baca Club. My friends call me Tina. So, Thriller, since I want to be your friend, why don't you call me Tina?" A huge smile appeared on her face at those words. I'm sure a smile appeared on my face too, because who wouldn't want to be friends with such a sexy lady? She continued, "Thriller, why don't you stop by Club Baca one night and please one of my clients? I like your game, and I know my clients will like you too." What could I say? All I could mumble was, "Sure, Tina. I think I'd like to be your friend, and I'll stop by soon one evening to play with you." She blushed at that remark, and I immediately realized what I had said and stammered again. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I meant that I would love to play with any of your musicians. Please forgive me for embarrassing you." By now, she was grinning and said, "Thriller, I take no offense. In fact, I am very pleased to receive such attention. Pay your visit soon. Okay?" With those words, she turned and walked out of the club. I didn't wait long to visit her club. I actually went there the next night, sat down with 4 other guys and girls, and played for a couple of hours. For the next 2 weeks, I pretty much split my time between Jared's and Baca. But once Tina and I started dating, I walked up to Jared and said, "Oh, buddy, you know that the girl always beats the guy, right?" He smirked and said, "Rick, I realized you were toast when I first saw you talking to Tina. You'd have to be crazy not to want to be with her. Every guy in town has been after that lady since she opened here, and she's after you. You're the man. Get out there and get excited. Tina and I have been together ever since." Anyway, back to the reception. I'm not big on flashy stuff, but she was getting an award, and I usually did my best to please her, so I agreed to take her along. I wondered if I should stop at a small bar before I picked her up and have a couple of drinks to relax for the night. I had plenty of time, so I looked into the squad room. It was a casual place catering to a wide range of clientele. There were guys in suits, ladies in fancy dresses, bikers with their biker girls, a couple of perpetual drunks, and a lot of regular working-class guys and gals. A regular place, it seemed to me. As I sat there, a little commotion started to my left, and before I knew it, 5 or 6 guys were getting down to business. I turned around on my bar stool and was watching when one of the guys was pushed in the back, and he came at me, splashing beer all over my shirt and pants. I crawled backward, and my hand knocked a shot glass off the bar. I wasn't furious, but I was a little pissed off, so I shoved him hard to get him off me. Luckily for me, the cops showed up at that moment, and all the guys fighting were dragged out of the joint and taken downtown. I had the misfortune of being one of them, so they dragged me downtown too. I couldn't believe this and kept protesting that I wasn't in the fight, but a young cop who saw me shoving a guy told his sergeant that I was. They put me in a cell and told me to shut up. You've guessed by now, of course, that I sat in the cell overnight and missed my date with Tina. In the morning, the cops questioned everyone involved in the case, and they all said basically the same thing. We have no idea who this guy is. For all we know, he was just sitting at the bar. I was released around 1 o'clock in the afternoon without any charges, which, of course, would have been great if I hadn't missed my date with Tina. And I knew she'd be pissed. I figured if I explained what had happened, it would be okay. Little did I know what was about to happen. I took a cab from the prison to the department to get my car. I drove home, grabbed a bite to eat, and headed for the shower. After changing into jeans and a sports shirt, I sat in my room and called Tina. I knew I was about to get my ass kicked, and I wanted to get comfortable while it was happening. I thought that after she let her anger out, I could explain to her what happened, and all would be forgiven. Then she said something that made the hair on my arm stand on end. "Rick, you weren't the only fish in the sea last night. When you didn't show up when you were supposed to pick me up, I called your cell phone, but it went to voicemail. I texted you but got no response. I waited for an hour, but I never heard back. I knew you didn't feel like going to the appointment, and I realized you were blowing me off. I called my very good friend Perry to see if he was available, and he was more than happy to drive me to the appointment. I missed a few special events that I was looking forward to. I barely made it in time to receive my award. A few more minutes, and I would have missed that too. For this reception, I bought a stunning dress, had my hair and nails done. I was stunning, and I wanted to make you proud. Instead, you blew me off. And to be honest, Perry was an amazing date. He thought I was stunning. He drooled over me all evening. This time, when she slowed her speech, I started to explain again that it wasn't my fault and that I was sorry, but she wouldn't listen. I asked her if I could come over and sit down with her to talk things over, and she laughed in response. "Rick, I won't be here. Perry and I have a date tonight. He's taking me out to dinner." I hurried out and headed to the club Tina owned, hoping to get a chance to talk to her face to face. When I arrived, the bartender, a hottie named Jessica, told me that Tina and Perry had already left. Needless to say, I wasn't thrilled. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, I called her again and told her that I would be coming to the club to talk to her. She told me not to worry because she had another date with Perry. I wasn't going to miss the chance to talk to her this time. When she came out of her office with that very good friend Perry, I started to walk over to her. Perry put his hand on my chest and said, "Hold on, buddy. I'm not sure the lady wants to talk to you. Tina, do you want to talk to him?" At this point, Tina shook her head no. So he smirked and kept his hand on my chest while I counted. Tina exclaimed, "No, Rick." When I got to 0, she stopped me where I was. Realizing I didn't want any more trouble, I'd already spent one night in jail. I simply said, "Perry, if you ever touch me again, I'll break your arm, your hand, and maybe even your neck." With those words, I turned and walked out the door. Tina shouted after me, "Rick, I'll call you tomorrow." I bluntly replied, "Good luck with that," and the doors closed behind me. I walked into the squad room, which was quickly becoming my favorite establishment, and had a couple of drinks before heading home. Around 10 p.m., I decided to stop by Tina's place and talk. I walked up to her dark house and rang the bell. I had a key, but I had never used it before and wasn't going to use it now. No one answered the door, so I walked back to my car and parked a little farther down the street to wait. It was past midnight when Perry finally brought Tina home. I figured he'd drop her off and drive away, and I'd come back and ring the doorbell to talk to her. But instead, Tina stood up on her toes and bestowed what I thought was a pretty firm kiss on him. Then she invited him in. I drove home in a daze and immediately started packing up the things Tina had left at my house. I packed clothes, nightgowns, underwear, various toiletries, and cosmetics into several garbage bags. I sat down, wrote a letter to Tina, and then went to bed. The next morning, I got up around 7 a.m., and by 11 a.m., I had everything ready to move on with my life. I drove to Tina's house, dropped my bags on the porch, and headed out of town. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I was headed east. Tina, waking up around noon, made herself a cup of coffee and went out on the porch to get the newspaper and mail. There were 2 garbage bags on the porch, one of which had a note attached to it. She quickly dragged the bags into the house and took the note to the kitchen table to read. "Dear Tina, I know we have never discussed the exclusivity of our relationship. I think that gives you the right to date whoever you want. I've been exclusive since I first saw you 3 years ago, and I thought you were too. I never thought we needed to say the word exclusive. I thought we just were. Obviously, I was wrong, and your ideas about it didn't match mine, my mistake. Like I said, you can date whoever you want, but I can treat it however I want to. Now I'm wondering how many other dates you've had. Again, that's your right, so I just have to accept it. But I don't like it at all. I also know I disappointed you by not taking you to the reception. I know it was a special night for you, and I would never ruin it on purpose. No matter how hard I tried to explain, it wasn't at all what you imagined. I went for a drink at the squad room and got arrested for something I didn't do. I sat in jail overnight, unable to make a phone call. In the morning, they finally started questioning me, and every one of them said I was an innocent bystander. I was eventually released around noon. I went home, cleaned up, ate a small lunch, and then, you know the rest. Take a look at this, you'll see that I'm telling the truth. But anyway, you decided to find another date for the evening and ended up going out with him 3 nights in a row. It's funny that in the 3 years I've known you, I've never once been introduced to this very good friend of Perry's. That, in itself, raises a lot of questions. Who is this Perry? And how can he be a very good friend when I don't know him? Are there other very good friends in the world? How many other dates have there been? Can hardly be argued that each of these questions is invalid. Anyway, after you refused to talk to me at the club, I was very hurt and angry. So I went out for a couple of drinks and then headed home around 10 p.m. I thought you must be home, and I really wanted to come over and talk to you about us. When I called your buzzer and no one answered, I decided to wait. I really needed to talk to you. I love you very much, and what you were doing is hurting me deeply. I wasn't going to spy on you, but by midnight, when you actually came home, I wasn't at my best. By then, yeah, I guess I was spying on you. But I just wanted to talk. I just needed to talk, Tina. I loved you more than anything in the world. I thought you loved me as much as I loved you. I guess I was wrong about that too, because I saw you kiss Perry and invite him into the house after the date. I guess that was another mistake on my part. If you really loved me the way I love you, you never would have invited Perry. Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to us? Anyway, I can see I'm confused, so I'm just going to close this letter and say I'm going on a little vacation. I thought you might need some of your things while I'm gone, so I packed them in these bags and took them to you. I apologize if I wrinkled your clothes. I hope everything works out for you. Rick. When I finished reading the letter, a cold sweat broke out, and I screamed, "What the hell have I done?" I immediately grabbed my phone and called Rick. To my surprise, I heard the phone ring in one of the trash bags. But no sooner did I reach for it than I got the following message. "This is Rick Miller. I'm sorry, but I won't be using this phone anymore. If the matter is urgent, call my attorney, Blake Bond, at his office. He has full power of attorney to handle all my affairs. If it's an urgent personal matter, call my friend Barry and leave a message." I immediately called Barry to see if he could tell me where Rick had gone. I desperately needed to talk to Rick and explain everything to him. I couldn't wait another minute to clear the air with him. I loved him as much as he loved me. When I got to Barry's house and explained that Rick had gone on a little vacation, his immediate reaction was, Oh. He then said he was at work and couldn't talk, but I should come over and talk to Shelley, his wife. She was obviously home, and he said he would call her and let her know I was on my way. When she opened the door, Shelley's first words were, "Tina, what the hell did you do?" This instantly shocked me, and I started to cry. Shelley put her arms around me and said, "Please, Tina, come in and tell me what this is all about." I gave her Rick's letter, and she took a couple of minutes to read it. She cried out in frustration, "Idiot!" The same reaction from both of them made me very worried. "Tina," Shelley began, "before we go any further, there are a few things you need to know. As you know, after Rick left for the army, he met and married a woman named Amy. He was in college at the time, and one day when he came home from class, he found Amy in bed with another guy. He made her aware of his presence and what he had seen, but then turned around and walked out of the apartment and out of her life. He left her a note in which he wrote that he was taking a little vacation. Rick left school and requested to return to active duty. He was then deployed to Iraq, where he served 2 tours. His short tour lasted 2 years, and no one knew where he was during that time. Tina didn't tell anyone for 2 years. When Rick finally came home, we learned where he had been and what had happened. He returned with a silver star and 2 Purple Hearts. The injuries he had sustained meant the military no longer considered him eligible for active duty. In fact, they only discharged him after lengthy counseling sessions, concerned that he had lost interest in his own life. Although he has fully recovered physically, the scars on his body are still there. Moreover, he also has to face the mental trauma from the past. However, he has stood up strong and is no longer afraid. After returning from Iraq and recovering, Rick met Angela. At first, he was hesitant to start a new relationship. It took him 2 years to finally decide to propose to her, and she said yes. One day, Rick met with his investment broker to discuss finances. After the meeting, they decided to go out for a drink. While sitting at the bar, Rick looked in the mirror behind him and noticed a familiar face. When he turned around, he saw Angela sitting in a secluded corner with another man. They were chatting intimately and clearly had a special relationship. Rick calmly called her name, "Hello, Angela." When she turned back, he just smiled and waved. Her face showed surprise, and he heard her call his name as he left. Then Rick left a voicemail saying he was going away for a while, and then he disappeared for 3 years. Like last time, no one knew where he went or what happened. When he returned, we learned that during his absence, he had become a jazz saxophonist under the name Rick Thriller. Rick was nicknamed Triller Miller in high school because he was a multi-talented person. No one thought he could make it anywhere else, but he did. When he returned, he continued performing at local clubs, still using his old stage name. Now you know the story. Tina, this must have hurt Rick a lot, Shelley said. And Barry too. He was Rick's best friend and he was going crazy not knowing where Rick was. I miss Rick a lot too. It makes our lives feel empty without him here. And now he's gone again. Tina was silent, tears streaming down her face. She said softly, "I love him, Shelley. I got angry over something so small, and instead of listening to Rick, I intentionally hurt him. I can't believe I did that. Tina, I hate to say it, but there's probably nothing we can do right now," Shelley sighed. "Rick might be gone for a long time, but I hope he comes back sooner than last time. If you really love him, be patient and wait. But this time, don't let anything hurt him any further." Tina nodded. "No matter how long it takes, I'll wait for him. If he contacts you or Barry, please tell him this. Rick, I'm sorry for hurting you. I love you with all my heart and I can't wait for you to come back." Rick had no specific plan when he drove out of Kansas City. He just knew he needed to get away from everything, Tina, Amy, Angela, to think things through. He wasn't much of a runaway, but he knew he needed time to figure himself out. When he got to St. Louis, he stopped to get gas and asked about popular jazz clubs in the area. Someone suggested a great place with great food and great music. Rick walked in, sat down, ordered, and enjoyed the atmosphere. Sitting at the bar, chatting with the bartender, he slowly found the piece he was looking for. About the local jazz scene in town, I told him that I like to play with local bands every chance I get, and he asked how long I had been playing. I replied that I've been playing since I was in high school, but more seriously for the last 6 or so years. I mentioned in passing that I had played a bit in New Orleans and had been invited to jam with a few bands there. He asked my name and I said my name was Rick Triller. When I said that, a big smile spread across his face, and he waved at a gentleman who was sitting at the end of the bar. He said, "Donald Jackson, meet Rick Triller." "Rick, this is Donald Jackson, the owner of this club." I extended my hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Jackson." A huge smile spread across his face. He squeezed my hand vigorously and said, "Nice to meet you, Thriller, and please call me Don." Grinning, he added, "You know the old saying about floating downstream, right? Well, in this case, it's talent that floats downstream. Rick, your reputation as a great jazz musician has preceded you. From time to time, musicians from the Big Easy have come to visit us, and your name has come up in conversation more than once. I'm honored to finally meet you. Are you in town for the long haul? If you are, We'd love to have you join us for a session or two. I know we'd all like to find out if your reputation is real or embellished. We have a group of guys who will start playing in about an hour. Would you like to join them?" I agreed to sit through one set, but after that, I had to leave and find a place to stay for the night. Ironically, one of the musicians was Bob Nodding Lubob. He and I had played together several times in New Orleans and knew each other pretty well. The set went great and I was feeling good. After a break, Bob pulled me aside and asked, "Rick, I need to talk to you about this. I can't help but notice that there is a great sadness in the way you're playing right now. I knew you the whole time you were playing in New Orleans, and I know you started out with that same sadness, but by the time you left, it was gone. Did something happen to you again? What made you hit the road again, Rick?" I couldn't help it. I was overwhelmed with emotion at those words. "Yes, Bob," I said. "I'm afraid I have the same problem as last time. Woman trouble." I smiled at him, and he said in a very serious voice, "Rick, I'm around if you need to talk, but I know you can handle all of this, and I know you'll pull through. And by the way, your jazz and blues rendition of Where Do Broken Hearts Go had everyone in the audience in tears. It was amazing." I told him, "I included that song because it so accurately reflects my feelings about Tina's actions and my own. I also included it because I wanted to pay tribute to Whitney Houston. I thought Whitney was a monumental talent, and I hope that everyone remembers her for exactly that. Not for the tragic mistakes she made in her life. I hope she's remembered as one of the best musical talents of all time." He patted me on the back and said, "Well, Rick, the fact that you play this music will certainly help that idea. I got to go now, Rick. I got to get back to work. Be sure to come back and join us whenever you want. And don't forget that I'm around if you need to talk about anything." I eventually found a place at the extended stay hotel and booked it for a month. I often played at Don's Club, but I also found a couple of other places where I liked to play. At one club, there was a singer named Ruby who approached me to see if she could sing along when I played Where Do Broken Hearts Go. I said I thought that would be fine, I'd play, and she could join in at the right moment. Where do broken hearts go? Can they find their way home, back to the open arms, to the love that awaits them there? And if someone loves you, won't he or she love you forever? I look into your eyes and know that you still care for me. To say we were a hit is an understatement. Every time we performed together at the club, we were sure to be asked to play that number again. When we finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Ruby and I often performed together at different clubs. I loved it, but at the same time, every time we performed, it hurt, because it was so close to my heart. One day, Bob casually said to me, "Hey, Thriller, I've been invited to play with the Lewis Hayes Jazz Communicators at the Detroit Jazz Festival this year. I'm sure they'd love to have you perform with them. Since you're Thriller, why don't we head north to Chicago, find some places to play for a week or two, and then go to Detroit for the festival? If LS Hayes won't take you, I'm sure there will be others who won't turn down the opportunity to play with Rick Triller. And by the way, in case you haven't noticed, Ruby and I have become a couple, and she's coming with me. So you two can go on about your business." That was the end of it, and we were off to Chicago. We spent 2 weeks visiting several clubs and then went to Detroit for a week for the festival. After the festival, Ruby and Bob headed back to St. Louis, and I decided to stay in Detroit for a while. I found 3 different clubs where I enjoyed playing, and in 3 weeks, I was able to completely sort out my unsettled personal life. During my time with Bob and Ruby, I realized that they had something special. I also realized that, even though I had been in 3 complicated relationships, I needed someone to love me. I missed my home and friends, so I decided to move back to Kansas City and start my life over. I stayed in Kansas City for about a week and managed to play at Jared's Club 3 or 4 times. Several locals came up to me and welcomed me back. It was nice to be missed. One night, a sexy girl walked into the club and moved to a table front and center. She sat and stared at me the entire set. When I played Where Do Broken Hearts Go, tears streamed down her face. After the show, she came up to me and said, "Hi, Thriller. I'm Christina Baca from Club Baca. My friends call me Tina. So, Thriller, since I want to be your friend, why don't you call me Tina? A huge smile appeared on her face as she spoke. She continued, "Thriller, why don't you stop by the Baka Club one night and make my customers happy? I like your game, and I know my clients will like you too." I knew the time would come when I'd see her again, but I didn't expect it to be like this. I hesitated. "I need to think about it, Christina," I said. I saw her flinch when I didn't call her Tina. A deep sadness spread across her face. She turned to leave but briefly turned back and said, "Rick, I hope you'll come to Club Baka. But if not, I won't bother you anymore. I just want you to know how sorry I am for hurting you. And I want you to know that I do love you." With that, she turned and hurried away. A few nights later, I walked into the Baka Club with my instrument. When Tina saw me enter, I realized that she was happy and sad at the same time. Tears appeared in her eyes, and honestly, it melted my heart. I approached her and said, "Christina, I don't want to be just your friend. Is it okay if your husband calls you Tina too? Will you marry me?" She jumped into my arms. "Oh yes, Rick, I will marry you. And please call me Tina for the rest of our lives."